This is Art Sense, a podcast focused on educating and informing listeners about the past, present, and future of art. I'm Craig Gould. On today's episode, I welcome back professor, entrepreneur, and author Magnus Resch to discuss his latest book, How to Collect Art. In his latest work, Resch provides a detailed playbook for aspiring art collectors who are eager to start a collection, but have little or no knowledge of galleries, auctions, art fairs, or art advisors. And now, a conversation about building an art collection with author Magnus Resch. Magnus Resch, thank you for joining me again on the Art Sense podcast. Magnus, you joined me last year when you released your book, How to Create and Sell NFTs. Just as a reminder to my audience, in your 20s, you started an art gallery. You went on to found the popular art platform Larry's List. And now you teach courses on the business of art at the Yale Business School. You've written a number of books, including Management of Art Galleries, How to Become a Successful Artist, the aforementioned How to Create and Sell NFTs. But now you have a new book, How to Collect Art. And when I look at the list of books, it looks like it's a little bit for a different audience, that it's not so much for the insider or the artist, the art professional, but it's for the person that's approaching the art world for the first time. Can you tell me, who did you have in mind when you decided to sit down and write this book?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on the podcast again. That's great. And I looked at the list of people and I followed you. I listened to a couple of interviews since we last spoke. And that's just what an impressive journey. I remember how we first met. That was in 2022. And you were telling me about this podcast. And I think you were at the beginning. The quality of speakers is just unbelievable. So Greg, thank you very much for the work that you're doing. I know that it's hard to always reach out to people, wait for them to get back, if they get back, and so on. So that's a fantastic job that you're doing there. And I love listening to the episodes that you're doing. Now, to your question, why this book? To me, it was kind of the next logical step. My first book was about art galleries. It was based on my PhD that I wrote in economics on art galleries. I wanted to find out what makes a gallery successful. Then my second big book with Phaidon, my publisher, was focused on artists. So at that point, I had gallerists and I had artists covered. The last most important player in the art world are collectors. So hey, I thought I've got to write a book on that. That was one reason. The other reason was really, with my books, I always try to fill a need. The gallery book was really coming out of the idea. I ran a gallery when I was 20, and I wanted to find out why other galleries seem to be more successful than I am. I was standing at an art fair, I looked at them, and I thought, oh, these guys seem to live a better lifestyle than I do. They seem to make more money. Turned out, thank God I wrote this PhD, turned out that they also had the same issues, and they were also fighting and struggling and so on. The artist book, which then followed in, I think, 2021, came out of the same idea. So many artists reached out to me and always said, Magnus, what do I do? How do I become successful? That was the one question they all asked me. How do we become successful? You're this professor, you wrote your PhD on that. What can I do to make money, to make a living from that? And that really triggered that book. And the collector book comes out of the same need. I know so many people who always ask me, what do I buy? Where do I start? Which gallery should I visit? I'm in New York. Where should I go? I'm in London, and so on. And to all of these people, I wanted to write a book to and to give them answers. So I don't have to tell them all the time the same things.
I think you do an amazing job laying this out for the person that's approaching the collecting of art for the first time. I appreciate how you kind of dive right in up front about how you can't necessarily think of art as an investment. I think your book begs the question, not only how to collect art, but there's the very big question of why should someone be collecting art?
Yeah, I talk about this at the beginning of the book. What are the motivations to buy art? When you think, hey, honestly, I just want to fill the white space above the sofa, you're not alone. That's the number one reason why people buy art. And that's what I try to tell people. Hey, you don't need to have, mega sophisticated reasons. You don't need to start buying art because you want to build the next MoMA. No, you buy art because you like to have nice things on the wall and there's white space. So go ahead and do it. And I explained to you how to do it in a smart way. Now, you mentioned art as an investment. The fourth reason why people buy art is as an investment purchase. Now, the other three, so number one is aesthetic reason, number two is emotional reason, and number three, I forgot. But number four is investing. So if you like to find out what number three is, take a look at my book, How to Collect Art.
It's obvious that you drill down into the numbers whenever you write a book. Not only are you talking to hundreds of people and getting their insights, but it sounds like you have a team that's really helping you gather a lot of data. And the data says that the movement in value on artwork is really at the highest tier. And so at the lowest tier, you need to kind of go into buying art knowing that you need to be buying something that you're happy with, be happy with the fact that you're even just supporting an artist.
Yeah, at the core of all my books are data studies. The first book, the gallery book, a PhD. The second and third book with Phaidon, it's actually overall my eighth book, but the third one with Phaidon, are also data studies. For how to collect art, the data study that went into it was a study that we published in Science magazine, where we looked at 500,000 artists and over 100,000 institutions in order to find out what makes an artist successful and what are the institutions that are driving the success of an artist. So when we talk about investing in art, the truth is, looking at all these data points, most art is not a good financial investment. Only at the very top end of the market, those blue chip works, those names that we've all heard, some of their works are good investments. The rest, everything else that you see, is most likely not a good financial investment. That means you will not see a return on these works that you purchase. They won't go up in value. And if you try to sell them tomorrow, it will be difficult. So people would ask, okay, then why buy art? And that's the whole idea of the book. First, I run you through the numbers and say, all right, if you like to invest in art, these are the artists and these are the galleries that you should buy from. And those exist. Art can be a good investment, but only if you go very deep and on a very niche and very selected group of artists at the very top with higher prices. Now, for everything else, I explained to you, hey, if that isn't a good investment, you should buy for other reasons. I call it responsible buying. So you buy art because you like to support an artist, you like to support a gallery, you like to tap into a community that you're not part of yet, but that you like to be part of. You're supporting a whole ecosystem. So it's almost a philanthropic act that has the benefit of giving you access to a whole new group and inspires you and also stimulates your emotional interest.
This kind of leads us into, the topic of where do I buy my art, right? And for most people, I mean, that world's changing. I mean, traditionally it's been art galleries. There's gatekeeping. Because there's gatekeeping, that's the reason we have such a vibrant auction community. But in this generation, people are welcome to reach out to artists directly. People are able to find artists that they love because they're following them on Instagram. How do you go about navigating that landscape? And if I were going to choose a gallery, what should I have in mind? Is it just simply what's the closest to me, or what should I have in mind when I enter an art gallery?
That's exactly what I run you through in the book. I dedicate a whole chapter to galleries and what you should do when you enter a gallery. But it starts earlier. It starts with how to identify a gallery that I like. Now, in the book, I recommend Instagram accounts to follow. So just by following these Instagram accounts already gives you a good idea of what's going on in the art world, at least some glimpse into the art world. And the beautiful or hated Instagram algorithm then recommends you more. So that's how you start your journey. You follow these accounts that I mentioned there, and from there on, you follow more accounts and more accounts. And some of these will lead to an actual physical visit in the gallery or reaching out to the artist and doing a studio visit. You will also be visiting a city, or maybe you live in a city where a lot of galleries are. So, for the biggest cities in the world, I explain when the key openings are, which apps to download to know when to visit galleries, to make your journey in the physical world a little bit easier. Once you visit a gallery, I explain step by step how you identify what type of gallery that is and what price points to expect. That also means you know if you're overpaying, if the gallery charges too much for or more than they should be. So, reading this book equips you with the knowledge to navigate the art world, online and offline.
Several times in the book when we talk about different sectors of the art world, you lay out tiers, alpha, beta, gamma, delta, tiers of, in this case, galleries. And I think it's helpful for people to understand that not every gallery is created equally. They probably all have in common the fact that they desperately want to sell work regardless of how it might seem when you enter.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing with galleries is they all look the same, right? You can walk down Chelsea and you simply don't have an idea if you're standing in an Art Basel gallery or if you're standing in a gallery that was just started yesterday and hasn't got any traction yet in the market. Obviously, there are a few galleries, Pace, for example, or Gagosian, you feel, okay, this gallery is just so big, it must be relevant. But most of the others almost have the same size. Size and location gives you no indication of the level of the gallery. Now, when I talk about these classifications, I do it for art fairs, I do it for artists, I do it for galleries, I do it for auction houses, I do it for art advisors. They serve to help you understand who you're talking to. So, am I talking to a superstar gallerist or am I talking to a gallerist who just started out? What is important is that I'm not judging them. I just want my readers to understand that from a gallery who just launched, their program shouldn't represent artists and most likely won't represent artists that are worthwhile an investment. So most likely you won't see your money again. That also means that the prices that they should charge shouldn't be extraordinarily high. Obviously, that's different when you talk to Pace Gallery, where artists are that are of an investment type of level and prices are usually higher. Now, what I just said is obviously a simplification and a very broad simplification. In the book, I go into more detail to explain to you the nuances that are so relevant to understand how to navigate this world.
There have been conversations we've had on the podcast before, and I think of, in particular, conversation with Simone Dupiri about, just how the middle market gallery, that beta gallery, that second tier, just how hard it is for them to navigate because they invest a lot in artists that are rising stars. But as soon as that artist becomes a star, the big alpha gallery snatches them away. When you think about that, it's actually a bit of an opportunity for you to understand that these beta galleries offer, if we are talking about value, they do offer you a subset of artists that are on the precipice of having a jump up to the next tier in pricing.
Exactly. So you need to be aware of that. Which gallery am I talking to here? Is that a beta gallery or a gamma gallery, a delta gallery? If I'm standing in a beta gallery, I might be looking at an artist who's making the next career step, which is interesting. If price points are fairly high, then I might be interested in understanding why the prices are so high, because that artist is about to make the next major jump. Now, beta galleries and gamma and delta galleries are incredibly important for the overall art ecosystem, because the typical journey of an artist is that it starts somewhere over there. So artists don't jump immediately to alpha galleries. No, they start at a lower ranked gallery and then make their journey up to the top if it works out. That's why that's one of the reasons why I'm writing this book, because I like to convert more art lovers into art buyers. These galleries all have a lot of people who are visiting at openings. 100 people are standing at an opening drinking Prosecco, but nobody is buying. So I would argue that there are, among those 100 people that come to an opening on a Thursday night to any gallery, there will be 5 to 10 who actually have the financial means and who could buy anything that hangs on these walls. But so far, they're not buying. As an art, the entire art world needs to convert these people into buyers. They are interested. They're already making the effort to go out there on a rainy, cold Thursday evening, but yet they're not buying. So why is that? I believe because of the lack of education and the lack of transparency. So by reading this book, I try to educate them to make that decision to buy their first work. Because once they have their first work hanging on their wall, they have a story to tell. They will show it to their friends. That encourages maybe their friends to buy a work because they can see that other people are doing it. And once they have one piece, they will start buying the next piece. That's always the journey. I call it the virus, but it's a positive virus. Once they have the collective fever, then they're into it. And we need more buyers in this industry.
It sounds like you understand that buying art is addictive.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the only addiction that I have. I have it under control sometimes.
Can we talk about art fairs and just how important art fairs have become to galleries? Because I think when we look at your data, it's apparent that it's a huge cost outlay for these galleries, but they continue to go because a high percentage of their revenues wind up coming through these art fairs. Can you kind of walk us through that landscape?
Art fairs are incredibly important because they bring together on a few days an event that is attractive for first-time buyers, rookies, as I call them, those who have the potential to buy but haven't bought yet, to see a lot of art. So over the years, the number of art fairs has increased dramatically. I remember when I started out 20 years ago in the art world, there were maybe 50 art fairs. Now there are 300 art fairs. They're all grouped around key art fair events. For example, Art Basel Miami, that now has over 20 satellite art fairs happening at the same time than the main fair, Art Basel. For collectors, these art fairs can be absolutely overwhelming. Think of Miami. You have these 20 art fairs. Which ones do I go to? And many people are not even aware that Art Basel is actually a brand and actually a fair that is taking place. So, they go to Scope, they go to Nada, they go to Untitled, often not knowing that there is a main fair, and that's why it's called Art Basel, which is based on a city in Switzerland. Your listeners will all know this, but I'm always surprised to hear how few people actually get it, that Art Basel is not just an art week, but it's only there because a fair from Switzerland decided to open up their tents there. Anyway, so what I explain to my readers is which art fairs do exist, which ones are the most relevant ones, how can you separate, how can you distinct one fair from the next? What price points can you expect at each fairs? And once you enter a fair, how can you navigate it? So, for example, when you enter Art Basel Miami Beach, the floor plan is the first thing that I look at and what I recommend all my readers to look at, because the floor plan tells you exactly the power play that is happening at a fair. Because the powerful galleries are usually at the best locations, and those galleries, the closest to them, are part of their network. This is based on of very similar findings we found in my research study where we looked at success factors of artists and institutions, where we realized that institutions work in networks. So those who are powerful are usually closely connected to each other. And once you understand reading the floor plan, you know how to walk over the fair.
I've noticed that as I've navigated art fairs, that right next to the door is obviously the highest real estate price, right? And then once you get upstairs and start working your way back, as soon as you see an artwork that features Marilyn Monroe or Elvis Presley, you know you've gone too far.
You know, I have a lot of friends who love Marilyn Monroe, Elvis on their artworks and have them hanging, especially those in Miami. So if you're looking for that, at least now I explained to you how to find them, because the biggest problem with art fairs is that you just get overwhelmed too fast. We cannot digest so much art in such a small time period and in such a small environment. So understanding, being able to read the floor map allows you to go to the art that you are interested in and also to the price points that you are able to afford.
You had a chapter in the book that I found really interesting because I feel like I just don't know enough about art advisors. And it seems like, it's a segment of the art world where it's a little opaque. It's hard to know who the real players are. It's hard to discern the high tier art advisor from the Gmail art advisor. Why would someone work with an art advisor, and how should someone determine whether the art advisor that they have found is the right fit for their needs?
I love art advisors. I think they're incredibly important because they're doing the job that you and I are doing. They are helping newbies to enter the art world, take them at their hands and walk them over fairs, bring them to galleries and so on. Art advisors are incredibly important to the ecosystem of the art world. Now, there are a lot of art advisors, but there are only a few art advisors that are really big. It's very similar to the gallery industry, where you only have a few galleries that are super big. And most of the other galleries are owner-run shops with interns. Now, with art advisors, it's very similar. Often they are owner-run with no employees or only one employee attached to them. And there are a few advisories that are really powerhouses that have 20 employees and so on. So I explain that, I mention a few names, and then I help my readers to understand what type of art advisor am I talking to, and how is one art advisor different to the next. And I recommend them, for example, to look at the history of their clients. How long have they worked with their clients? What type of clients are these? How much are they spending? How frequently are their clients spending? You can always judge an art advisors at best by looking at their clients. Obviously, they won't give you names, but you can see what are they posting on their Instagram, who's following them. Sometimes they post photos of clients that hang new works, so you know what kind of category the art advisor is in. Again, being an art advisor is an incredible tough job. Often you have to explain basic details to your clients, and you have to do it over and over again. Converting people who are buying art for the first time is a long process, so they invest a lot of time and money and dedication into bringing in new people in the art world. That's why I try to do some of the basic explanations and education with this book. So I hope all the art advisors will give my book to their clients, so that helps them to talk less at the beginning and do less education.
Where do we draw the line between art advisors and art dealers? Is it a matter of their ability to financially get into the middle of a transaction?
Well, all these words are kind of used very vaguely. Art dealers can be gallerists and so on. I always say a gallerist is someone who has a physical location and actually works with artists to do shows.
Sure.
Now, since we both met at an NFT conference, I have to edit that comment. So it doesn't need to have a physical location, but it's important that they put up shows in galleries or in the metaverse and work closely with artists. Art advisors are people who are working on the other side. They're working with collectors and they are advising collectors. They are only responsible towards the collectors. They don't work with artists. They don't work with galleries. Their main interest is to sell art or help their clients, who are the collectors, to sell art. Now, art dealers are something else. Art dealers are traders. They buy often on their behalf from galleries, sometimes through the introduction from art advisors, but their main goal is to buy artworks at a lower price and sell at a higher price
So you
without any strong connections to artists or without putting up exhibitions for artists, nor with the idea to sit on the art forever and pass it on to their children, which art collectors mostly do.
there are always exceptions to all the rules because your appendix of all the people you spoke to, I saw Stefan Simkowitz's name. Stefan keeps kind of moving in and out of, advisory to patron to dealer to, oh, I'm going to open up a gallery and.
Yeah, of course. I mean, again, that's a simplification. Of course, you have people like Adam Lindemann, who is a collector, but also a gallerist, but also an art dealer. And you have people like Kenny Schachter, who
Mhm.
is a gallerist, but doesn't want to be named a gallerist and is an artist and a dealer and an auctioneer and whatnot. Right. So, of course, you have these characters. But when you look at it, you always have exceptions. But when you look at it from a broader scale, then those characteristics and those players that are identified before really understanding their roles and their differentiating factors is important to classify other people.
Sure.
Now, you mentioned something which is very important to me. For the book, I did a large-scale research study, the largest ever conducted in the history of the art market. It was awarded Paper of the Year, published in Science magazine, which is
Wow.
the #1 academic journal in the world. It's based on my personal experience too of 20 years activities in the art world in different roles, but it's also based on a lot of interviews and case studies that I did with collectors, art curators, auctioneers, gallerists, and so on. I spoke to over 200 of the world's most important art market experts, all with one idea or with one question. I always ask them, what's your advice to someone who's starting to buy art? And then out of these, you find many of the quotes from these interviews in the book. Over 200 quotes made it in there, plus 8 or 9 in-depth case studies, which are helpful to better understand who the key players are. You can follow all of these people on Instagram and also hear what their advice is for someone who's starting to buy art.
So, you mentioned earlier, we met at an NFT conference. Your last book was about navigating the NFT space as a creator. You do have a chapter in this book on NFTs. Can you kind of give a little insight on how, obviously, a lot has happened in the NFT space over the last year and a half? Where are we in terms of NFTs, and what is your perspective?
Yeah, the one chapter is dedicated overall to NFTs, particularly to technology in the art world, where I touch upon technological trends that will matter, because that's something that I've always been interested in, that I pursued professionally: technology, art, and business. NFT is obviously a hot topic um, in the art world, and it won't go away.
Right.
I've always said that digital art never has the possibility to take over paintings, not in our lifetime. I was having a long conversation with people. He came to my Yale class and he said, "Hey, I believe in a few years the MoMA will be full of digital artworks. Why should anyone create paintings anymore?" And I totally disagree there.
Right.
I believe painting will still be, right now, it's over 92% of all the transactions, and the value is paintings. Um, so paintings won't go away. I believe that the blockchain technology will have an impact on the art world. And that's what I explain in this chapter in the book, where I say, hey, that's going to happen. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but I want you to understand why blockchain technology will have an impact on the art world. So I talk about provenance. I talk about artist royalties. I talk about independence of artists and how that might challenge the role of galleries. My view is very straightforward. I believe that every painting in the future will be registered on the blockchain the moment it leaves the studio. And whenever the painting is traded, it's the artist immediately gets royalties. This solves the problem of provenance quite dramatically, because now we can see whoever owned it, and what the transaction prices were, and so on. It will create additional transparency, which will lead to higher liquidity, which will then lead to more people entering the market, because they know that they're sitting on an asset that they be able to sell faster with much lower transaction costs. When is that going to happen? People always ask me. Well, it's not going to happen tomorrow. I believe that this will happen after other luxury industries have started using it. I believe the watch industry will be one of the first to implement, register all their watches on the blockchain, paired with an NFT. So whenever I sell my watch on the secondary market, I will need to show proof of ownership by owning the NFT. I don't even think, by the way, that we will still use the word NFT in the future. It's kind of burned. It's kind of an ugly word,
Right.
especially for the art industry. But the technology, that's why it's so important to focus more on the technology rather than on NFTs. And while talking about this, I'm everyone knows that I'm a big advocate, a big lover of digital art and all the activities that artists did there. I think so many artists have done an incredible job, and we will still, in 10 years, we will look back to some of these artists and say, hey, they were really trailblazers. They were first of something new, and it started there. And now, 10 years forward, we're only seeing the consequences of this.
I totally agree with everything you're saying there in terms of just the ability to track provenance solves real pains the art world's had for decades and decades, of if not just the whole history of the art world. And yeah, but I agree that the term NFT is probably going to transform. The technology will be used, but the term is probably going to not necessarily be attached to what goes on in the art world. I think one of the things that I see, especially with a player like Arcurial, who's founded by the folks that run Art Basel.
Yeah.
There's a kind of an intentional desire to create a proprietary blockchain where everything is secure, everything can be known, but not everything is transparent. And so that's a little bit different, and maybe that makes the people in the art world feel a little bit more comfortable knowing that the data just isn't out there for everyone to see, but for the person that needs to know can know.
Yeah, totally agree. And I admire what Bernardine is doing at Accrual. Fairchain is another one that is doing a great job there with Charlie in the leads. I just think that they are super early.
Hmm.
And the art world is always last to adapt to anything new, right? That's why it's so important. And that's why I included that whole chapter on technology in the art world, because I want my readers to understand the basic terms so they're knowledgeable about what is going to happen in the future. At least they can keep an eye on it. So whenever things are mentioned, they can kind of put it in the right context. And that's what this book is all about. It's about education, because I believe that with education, more people will buy art. And that's what the art world needs the most, more buyers.
So, Magnus, as we discussed, you have talked to hundreds of people, and I mean, just the amount of research that's gone into your books is amazing. Of all those conversations where you've been able to buttonhole some important person at the far reaches of the art world, are there a couple of conversations that really kind of stick with you, the little tidbits that you really kind of often reference in your head that was really insightful? I'm glad I was able to spend 5 minutes with this person or that one.
So Carlos and Rosa de la Cruz, I really enjoyed meeting them. They're a collector couple in their 80s now, really all collector couple, super nice and fun. They have a museum in the Design District in Miami. They always open their private home during Art Basel for the VIP ticket holder. Um, and I was just so amazed by their approach to collecting. They're these type of collectors who are laser focused. They have 500 works in their collection. That's really not a lot for collectors at that level with a private museum and a big house full of art. Um, they don't have storage. They really hang their art in their museum. They're completely self-funded, so they don't take any grants. They don't take any money from the city. They're just completely independent, and whenever they buy something, it's almost like a sniper. They wait there and wait and wait and wait for the right moment, and then they purchase the work, and it all needs to be connected to existing works. So they can tell you they know more about any of the artists that they're collecting than most curators who are focusing on these artists, simply because they just go so deep. I found this amazing. And then, I spoke to 200 other of the biggest collectors. And one thing, and gallerists too, and curators and advisors, um, directors of museums, and so on. And one thing they all said: buy with your eyes instead of with your ears, and see as much art as possible.
Hmm.
So when I asked them, hey, thanks for the conversation, can we summarize your advice in one line? I had to send out the caveat and say, hey, you're not allowed to say buy with your eyes, and you're not allowed to see as much art as you can, because then I would have just printed that 200 times in the book. So they had to come up with something different. But if they could, they would have all said the same thing. So whatever, Instagram, art advisors, other platforms, all of this is great, but nothing takes away the work that you have to do. And that means you need to see as much art as possible. You need to engage in that community. You need to talk to artists. You need to talk to gallerists. You need to visit their spaces in order to find out more about them, but also to find that inspiration that will kickstart your journey in the art world. Nobody can take that away from you. And that's why in the book, I explicitly talk about places and tools that help you to start going and seeing these places.
Magnus, the book is How to Collect Art. It's available now. I can't say thank you enough for you sitting down and talking to me about your work. I really appreciate the service that you're doing to make the art world more accessible to the people that want to dip their toe in.
Thank you for having me, Craig. I can only return the compliment. Everyone who's listening now, please buy some art. And before you do that, consider buying my book. And if you do, please take a photo of the book and tag me. I'm always interested to hear who my readers are. And I promise you, if you write me an email or if you write me a DM, and if I see it, I will respond. I try to respond to every email and to every message that I get. It can get sometimes quite overwhelming, but it's actually me who is responding and nobody else from the team.
Well, thanks again, Magnus. That's all the time we have for this week. You've been listening to ArtSense. You can find the show on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. If you've enjoyed this podcast, be sure to subscribe. And while you're there, please rate the show and leave a quick review. Your feedback is the key to other folks finding us. And if you'd like to see images related to the conversation, read the transcript, and find other bonus features, you can go to Cambia.art and click on the podcast tab. If you'd like to reach out to me, you can email me at craig@cambia.art. Thanks for listening.